The telegram from the cruise line came at 9:15 on a Wednesday morning, and by 10 the ballroom on B deck was already half a museum. Lionel Vassay, retired horn player, 58 years old, sat at the writing desk in his small cabin on F deck and read the telegram twice. The SS Pelagia, after 41 years of Atlantic crossings, was being decommissioned. Final voyage, New York to Genoa, departing in 11 days. Crew dismissal packages would be distributed at Genoa. Thank you for your service. Regards. He folded the paper into thirds. Then he folded it again. Then he set it on the desk and put his old practice mute on top of it, as if the telegram might lift off the wood and float out the porthole if it weren't weighted. Then he went to find Toma. This is the story Lionel told decades later to his great-nephew on a Vermont porch, Lionel by then 83, the Pelagia long broken for scrap. The boy was 20, a pianist, and wanted to know why his great-uncle's eyes still glassed at certain chords. Lionel set down his coffee. There was a man, he said. There was a man who lived his whole life on a ship and never once set foot on land. He was born on her in a steerage cabin in 1955. The mother died on the crossing. The ship's engineer found the baby on the lid of a piano in the second-class lounge and kept him, raised him in the boiler room, named him Toma after a saint the engineer liked. The boy never went to school, he never had papers. The captains who replaced each other across the decades inherited him the way a house inherits a cat. He never tried to leave, and after a while everyone forgot to make him. By 9, the ship's pianist had taught him a scale to keep him quiet. By 11, there was nothing left to teach. He heard a chord once and had it. Lionel met him as a small boy. Lionel had been hired in 1957 as second horn in the ship's small orchestra, a young man of 28, and he had stayed 30 years for reasons he could never properly explain to people on land. By 1987, he was second horn no longer, he was the elder of the brass, and the small boy was now a young man of 32 with the unworn face of someone the wind that ages a sailor never quite touched. Toma played the ballroom piano. The passengers loved him without knowing his last name. The crew loved him with the particular love crews give to the one person on board who never asks to be anywhere else. Their friendship was the kind that builds itself out of small repeating things. Coffee at 4 bells, a particular brand of pencil Lionel bought in Halifax for Toma's manuscripts, a chess game they had been playing on and off since Toma was old enough to reach the board. And for 30 years, in port after port, Lionel had written him notes and slid them under his cabin door, and for 30 years, every time the ship reached a port, Lionel asked. He asked at Le Havre, he asked at Lisbon, he asked at Buenos Aires when the harbour lights looked like spilled sugar, he asked at Naples when the lemon trees were close enough to throw a pit from the rail and hit, he asked at New York. Toma, he said, come down with me, one walk, one coffee at a real table. For 30 years, Toma had said no. He never said it angrily. He said it the way a man tells you he does not eat shellfish, politely, without explanation, as a settled matter. Once, in 1968, he had tried to explain it. They were sitting on the bow at midnight outside Casablanca. The lights of the city ran along the water like a long phrase. Toma said, very quietly, that a city had no end. That a city went on and on into streets he could not see the end of. That from the deck of a ship you could see where the world stopped. That he could play any music a man could hear because the keys on a piano went from here to here and stopped. 88 keys. 2 ends. He could play forever inside 2 ends. But a city, Toma said. A city had no last key. Lionel had not understood it then. He told himself, later, that he had not understood it for 30 years. Then the telegram came. Lionel found Toma in the ballroom at the White Grand. The ballroom had been emptied of its tables. 2 men in coveralls were measuring the chandeliers. The piano had a yellow tag tied to its leg already. Lot 247. Toma was sitting at the piano not playing, his hands resting on the closed lid the way a horseman puts his hand on a horse he has owned 20 years. Lionel sat beside him on the bench. He held the telegram in his lap. He did not need to read it. Toma had already seen one. Toma knew the ship the way other men know a wife's breathing. They will sell her, Lionel said. Yes, Toma said. They will give us papers in Genoa, Lionel said. Real papers, a pension envelope, a ticket to anywhere. Toma did not answer that part. Toma, Lionel said, come ashore with me. This time at Genoa. We will walk to a cafe I know in the old port. You will eat focaccia, you will see a real lemon tree, you will live. Toma turned and looked at him. His eyes were very steady. They were the eyes of a young man who has thought about a thing his whole life and does not need to think about it again. "Lionel," Toma said, "I have lived. You think I have not lived because I have not stepped onto a road, but a road is a road. A piano is a piano. I have been a pianist my whole life. I have heard every weather. I have known every passenger who came through this room, and I have played the song each one needed before they knew they needed it. I made music for a woman whose husband died in cabin C22, inches 1978. I made music for the boy in the green coat who could not sleep in 1984. I have lived." He turned back to the keys. "But this time," Lionel said. "This last time, please." Toma closed his eyes. He breathed in once. He set his hands on the closed lid. "I will play tonight," he said. "After dinner, the last night before Genoa. You come and sit. You bring your horn. You play with me one tune. Then in the morning, we will see what a man does." Lionel went out. His chest felt too narrow for his ribs. He spent the 11 days like a man preparing a wedding he did not want. He oiled his horn, which he had not played in public in 9 years. He pressed his black jacket. He told the ship's bartender, a Greek named Stavros, that there would be a thing in the ballroom on the last night, and Stavros wept openly and said he would bring whiskey and the good glasses. Word travelled along the crew the way word does on a ship, low and warm and without anyone announcing it. The passengers got the same message in a different key. The captain made a brief announcement after the farewell dinner. The ship's pianist would give a final performance at 2200. Black tie optional, champagne provided. He did not say the pianist had been born on the ship the captain knew. Toma did not want that. He only said that the young man had been with them a long time and would not be coming with them where they went next. Lionel thought he understood that last sentence. He turned out to be wrong about exactly what it meant, but he was not wrong about its weight. At 9:50, the ballroom was full. Lionel had never seen it full like that. Every seat taken, every wall lined, sailors in white jackets along the back. The chief engineer, who had not put on a tie in 11 crossings, in a tie. Stewards from the lower decks, who had never been allowed in the ballroom, standing now along the side, invited up by the captain for one night because the captain understood what he was looking at. At 10, the ship's lights dimmed once, the way they do when the dance is about to start, and Toma walked in. He wore the same black suit he had worn for years. The cuffs were shiny. He had brushed his hair back with water. He carried no music. He had never used music. He walked to the piano the way a man walks to a friend in a hospital, not slow, not fast, with the small, careful precision of someone who knows the floor. He sat. He waited 3 seconds. Then he set his hands on the keys. What he played that night, Lionel said, was not one piece. It was the ship. It was a lifetime of the ship. It was a suite he had been writing in his head, Lionel realized later, the whole time. He never wrote it down. He never recorded it. He played it once. He began with something small. A tune the boilerman used to whistle in the engine room in the 1940s, a Sicilian thing, 4 bars. He let it walk across the keyboard alone. In the bass, the way Toma himself walked the corridors at night. The room went very still. Then he layered over it. In the right hand, the sound of the foghorn, not literally, you can't put a foghorn in a piano, but he found a chord, low and minor and held, that meant foghorn the way a word means a thing. Lionel sat in the second row with his horn across his knees and felt the chord enter his chest like cold sea air. People around him stopped breathing in the way people do at a railway accident, except this was the opposite. Toma moved through the ship room by room. He played the engine room as a march that kept catching on itself. He played the second-class lounge as a soft waltz that had been danced to 1,000 times by people who had been dead for 50 years. He played the chapel on G-deck as a chorale so quiet you had to lean. He played cabin C22 as 4 falling notes and a held silence, and the widow's daughter, who happened to be on board this crossing because she was a woman now and wanted to retrace a journey, put her hands over her face and made no sound. He played the bow at midnight. He played the lemon trees of Naples that he had only ever seen from the rail. He played a city he had never walked. He played the harbour lights of Buenos Aires as a long ascending phrase that resolved on a single note held for so long the chandeliers seemed to listen. And then, at some point, Lionel could not afterwards place, Toma began to play the part he had written for the friend. It was just a tune, a simple, brave little tune, the way you might write a tune for a child you loved. Lionel heard his own life in it, the missed boat in Marseille, the chess games, the pencils from Halifax, the 30 years of asking at every port. There was no mockery in it, there was no apology, there was only thank you. Lionel found, without remembering, deciding that his horn was at his lips. He played. He had not played in public in 9 years, and his lip was not what it had been, but the horn knew the way. He played the friend's tune back to the pianist, an octave below, the way a man answers his own name across a crowded room. Toma did not look at him. Toma smiled, very slightly, and laid a chord under the horn line so the horn line could rest on it, and the two of them carried the tune together for 16 bars, and the ballroom carried it with them in the perfect stillness of held breath. When the chord finally released, the room did not applaud. Not yet. The room could not. Toma sat for a long moment with his hands on the keys. Then he played the ending. He played the last 7 minutes of his life, Lionel later understood, though he did not understand it then. He played the foghorn chord again, this time turned upward into something like a sunrise. He played the Boilermen's tune again, slower, as a benediction. He played one ascending phrase that climbed and climbed up the keyboard until it reached the very last key, the highest C, and he held it there with one finger and let it ring and let it ring and let it ring and let it end. He took his hands off the keys. He stood. He bowed once, deeply, not to the audience but to the piano. Then he turned and bowed to Lionel. The room rose. It rose the way a swell rises at sea, slowly, all of one piece, with a kind of inevitability. Sailors stood. The chief engineer stood. The widow's daughter stood. The captain, who had been standing already, came forward and put his hand on Toma's shoulder and did not let it go for a long time. Stavros, the bartender, stood with a glass in each hand and tears on his jaw and did not pour. The applause, when it came in a long single wave that did not break for 9 minutes. Toma let it wash over him. He did not raise his hands. He only looked at Lionel. Then he leaned down close to Lionel's ear and said one sentence, and Lionel kept it the rest of his life and only said it aloud the night he told the story to his great-nephew on the porch in Vermont. "Old friend," Toma said, "thank you for asking." The ship docked in Genoa the next morning. Lionel went up on deck at 6. The harbour was grey and quiet. He looked for Toma at the rail. He looked for Toma in the ballroom. He looked for Toma in the small cabin on E-deck where Toma had slept his whole life. The cabin was tidy. The chess set was put away. The black suit hung on the back of the door. On the small desk, in Toma's careful pencil hand, was a single line. "A piano has 2 ends, a city has none. Go ashore for both of us." Lionel stood in the cabin for a long time. Then he went up to the bridge. Nobody had seen Toma since the last chord. The crew searched the ship. The captain searched the ship. The Italian harbour police searched the ship. They never found him. There was no splash anyone could remember. There was no note beyond the one Lionel held. The Pelagia gave up no body and offered no explanation, and that was the kind of thing the Pelagia did, the captain said quietly to Lionel that afternoon. The way a ship does at the end. Lionel walked off the gangplank at 3 in the afternoon. He carried his horn case, a small bag of clothes, the chess set, Toma's last pencil, and the single folded line of paper. He stood for a moment on the cobbles of the old port with his eyes closed. The cobbles were warm. There was a lemon tree at the end of the quay. He could smell it from where he stood. He walked to the cafe he had told Toma about 30 times. He sat at a real table. He ordered focaccia and a glass of white wine. He ate slowly. He did not weep. He listened to the city, which had no last key, which went on and on into streets he could not see the end of, and he listened for the chord his friend had taught him to hear, the one the city makes if you are quiet enough, and he heard it. He played horn in a small Genoese orchestra for the next 26 years. He never went back to sea. He kept the chess set on a shelf in a small flat above a bakery, and on Sunday evenings he would set out the pieces in the position they had been in on the last night and stare at the board and move nothing. On the porch in Vermont, the great-nephew sat very still and did not interrupt. The evening had gone the colour of a bruise. Crickets were starting. Lionel looked at the boy's hands, which were a young pianist's hands, and laid his old hand briefly over them. "Play," he said. "Play, and walk into the streets, and play. He gave us both. Don't waste either." The boy nodded. He could not speak for a moment. Then he got up and went inside and sat down at the small upright in the living room, and he played, very quietly, 4 falling notes and a held silence, a phrase he had never heard before, a phrase his great-uncle had hummed without knowing he was humming it for the last 20 minutes, and the old man on the porch closed his eyes and smiled the way a man smiles when, after a long time, someone he loved comes back into the room.